The Sabrael Confession, The Heavenly War Chronicles, Book 1, written by Stephen Smith and read by Christopher Neal, Juris Doctor. Chapter 4. You look the way Michael used to, Raphael said, seating himself beside me near the edge of my hall. He spread his wings to lean against the tree. If you are not careful, you may find your hair turning gray. He was smiling, but I wasn't in the mood. That would be fitting, since I am as much to blame for Lucifer's banishment as Michael. Raphael placed a hand on my shoulder, his emerald eyes filled with compassion. What happened is no one's fault. Lucifer chose his path. He suffers now because of the decision he alone made. I could have done more, I replied. I should have. Like what? Raphael asked. What would you have done differently now that you know where Lucifer's path led? I would try to see as he did, understand better what he was feeling. So you could have shared in those feelings? Raphael asked. Yes, I replied. So you could share in his punishment too? Is that it? I shook my head and held my tongue, stubbornly holding onto my guilt. You did what you could. Any more, and you would have been exiled to hell as he was. Let it be. Hell, air. The name my brothers gave to Lucifer's pit. It stung just to hear it. Besides, we need your help. How can I possibly help anyone? I asked. You know that Lucifer performed a multitude of jobs in the kingdom. With all that has happened, his work has gone undone, not to mention the work of all the other fallen. God has decided to divide those tasks and assign them to others. Michael and Gabriel have already claimed the majority of the tasks between them, but many still remain. Is the Almighty not worried that pride will overcome Michael and Gabriel as it did Lucifer? I asked. They promised to keep a watchful eye on each other. Should either start down Lucifer's path, the other will alert God to prevent another expulsion from the kingdom. And this involves me how? I asked. He smirked. God has assigned you a new task. It is far more interesting than gardening. I said nothing, and he laughed. Be excited, you fool. This task is worthy of an important angel, yet somehow it is being given to you. I ignored the insult in his teasing. Just tell me what it is. God plans to appoint a single guardian to watch over and protect each of the halls, and you have been named. Guardians? Why do the halls need protection? I do not know. but I have heard Michael and Gabriel whispering of something God has foretold, something called war. War, war, an unknown concept in heaven at that time, but one that frightened me deeply, even in ignorance of its meaning. Whatever it might be, if it meant the halls needed guarding for the first time in all of creation's history, war must not be good. Do you understand, Sabrael? 7 halls, 7 angels, 7 out of the entire host. For any angel, this would be a great honor. But for you, it is almost inconceivable, for your seat is farther from the throne than any other who has been chosen. How can you be so calm? It doesn't make sense. Why would he choose me? Who else has been selected? Michael and Gabriel, of course. Then Haniel, Uriel, Barakiel, and oh, yes, me, Raphael said with a gleaming smile. You see, you will be the only guardian from outside the first 2 circles. I do not know what you did to impress him, so, but well done. I didn't understand. My brothers who shared this honor were from the closest rows in the hall of song, angels who literally sat at the Almighty's feet. As my mind traced over the possible reasons for my appointment, I recalled something Lucifer said to me before his transformation. You are a good friend, truly special. I shall not forget this in my discussion with God. Was this the result of whatever Lucifer told the Almighty about me? Had he brought about this blessing as his last act of goodness before his awful fall? I looked at Raphael, searching for some answer, but he just threw an arm around my shoulder and led me to the Hall of Song for our first meeting. To my surprise, the Almighty was waiting for us. There, in His presence, the Creator of all speaking to me, saying my name. I was at first speechless. As the meeting wore on, though, the crippling awe was swept away by a sense of complete comfort, as though this was no special occasion at all. He was my parent, friend, Lord, and companion all at once. The urge to ask why I had been chosen as a guardian crept into my mind. But standing there with the others, it seemed ungrateful to utter the words. By the time we adjourned, the 7 of us were in possession of the first weapons ever seen in heaven, specifically designed for the angel who would wield them. Each was as unique as the one who bore it, concealed within the folds of my right sleeve. I now carried a double-edged sword, which could either stab forth at nearly imperceptible speed or drop into my hand at the meeting. All it took was a thought, and the weapon would instantly appear. Upon returning to my hall, what I found there stopped me cold. The crimson gold banners and the buildings gleamed as they always had, but now a high wall encircled the hall's perimeter. Even the archway facing the Hall of Song has changed. A massive gate now affixed to it. Closer inspection revealed the wall was made of a thick stone, while the gate itself was a metal, much like that of my sword. The greatest surprise, though, was high above on the archway over the new gate. Angelic script inscribed in the stone read, "First hall of heaven, let all who enter here be protected by the guardian Sabrael." Only then, seeing these words, did I fully realize the honor bestowed upon me. I fell to my knees and thanked God. Throughout heaven, each hall was now surrounded by a wall with a gate, like mine. The entire kingdom had been fortified. While I didn't understand how anyone could escape the fiery prison below, the Almighty told us in our meeting with Lucifer the Almighty told us in our meeting that Lucifer would eventually find his way back. So we stood at the gates, weapons ready, awaiting the arrival of the fallen. Yet despite these changes, the attention of the host wasn't centered on fortification. It wasn't even focused within the gates of heaven, but instead far away, out in the void. While we were busy tending to our expanded duties and overseeing the further reinforcement of defenses, the Almighty began working on a new paradise. Hovering in the darkness surrounding heaven and hell, God concentrated all his energy on a single point. While we were busy tending to our expanded duties and overseeing the further reinforcement of defenses, the Almighty began work on a new paradise. Hovering in the darkness surrounding heaven and hell, God concentrated all his energy on a single point. Focused, unresponsive, he remained there for what seemed like ages. We could see the struggle on his face, feel his immense power being channeled into the abyss. Heaven trembled with it. Then, finally, it happened. A shape formed in the void, and where before there was nothing, there was now something tiny, unimaginably dense. This thing floated before him, perfectly still. The Almighty, exhausted after such effort, reached out and took it into his hand. All that power to create something so small? None of us watching understood. What could it be? Then God whispered to it, and it exploded. The command of the Almighty was like a stone dropped into water. A brilliant and massive fire rippled through the darkness. altering the very fabric of the void. Infinitesimally small shards of the original mass scattered in its wake. Galaxies came into being, stars were formed, an entire universe expanding by the moment, and all of it composed of that new substance God had expended so much energy to create, matter. While heaven and all of us within were made of spiritual, immaterial essence, this new universe was of physical matter. The physical plane of existence had been born. Understand that this process took eons to accomplish. While the main events of creation have been recorded as occurring in just days, I assure you this isn't literal. Days are used to describe this time because a day is measurable. In a day, there exists a beginning and an end. And once a day is through, a new and different one begins after it. The actual amount of time it took to create the universe was so long that science only now begins to comprehend the truth of it. And the universe is still expanding. As the initial combustion cooled on the fragments of matter, as the initial combustion cooled and the fragments of matter slowed in their trajectories, the cosmos took shape. Solar systems settled. Planets found orbits. Then the Almighty selected one of these planets and descended to its surface to manage its development. Water separated from land to create a foundation for exotic and beautiful plants, which then sprang from the soil. The air was at first unsure of how to coexist with these plants, but soon a balance was reached, and God readied the world for other forms of life, which soon appeared. Awestruck by these creatures, I, like so many others, spent all my time watching them adapt to their new paradise. Many of the earliest creatures even went extinct as the world evolved and continued to settle. Soon we thought the world complete, with the animals living in tranquility and none exhibiting any sign of the sin that had damned Lucifer. Yet the Almighty remained there, taking in all he had done, and we wondered why he didn't come home. Then, one day, no different from any before it, we found out why all this had been done. In a lush valley, nestled between two great rivers, God crouched and sculpted a shape from the dust. It wasn't exactly like the primates it seemed modeled after, for its tail reached only to its knees, but its body was covered in hair, and its figure was nearly the same. When it was done, the Almighty bent and breathed into the form. For a moment, nothing. Then the dust flared, glowing as though made of embers. A string of fire spread over the form, and as it passed, the dust transformed into flesh and blood. This moment, this creation, was more important than any before it. In this form, the Almighty made an entirely new kind of being. When he breathed life into the dust, the essence of the spiritual plane manifested in the form of a soul. This was a creature that existed not in the physical or spiritual planes of creation, but in both. When it set up and breathed its first, we in heaven burst into the loudest, most triumphant song ever heard. God had created the gem of all creation. God had created man. The man stood, and God called him Adam. Then God led him through the prepared paradise known as Eden to name its animal inhabitants. In heaven, we crowded together in glee, amazed at the shimmer of the soul within that Adam himself could not see, but which was the testament to his unique nature. The soul nourished and controlled the body, an unprecedented symbiosis. Overwhelmed by fascination, I couldn't stand watching from so far away. Driven without thinking, I ran to heaven's gate, desperate to get a closer look at Adam and his world. I froze as I looked down. Earth was there, beckoning in all its beauty, but hell raged below as well. The sight of it terrified me. Like a beacon of caution, Lucifer's prison stood as a warning of where I might be sent should I do what I was planning without permission. But curiosity and excitement outweighed my fear. I needed to see Adam up close. Making sure no one was watching, I closed my eyes and stepped through the gate. Soaring down from heaven, wings spread, I landed softly in Eden. The beauty of the strange world instantly besieged me. There was so much to see, everything so different from the kingdom. But before I could take it all in, the Almighty and Adam approached. Realizing how stupid it had been to come here uninvited, I dove into a copse of trees to avoid being caught. I crouched there, enthralled by the sight of Adam just a few feet away. As soon as they reached my hiding spot, the Almighty said, Sabrael, I know you are here. My body went rigid with fear, but he beckoned with a smile. Come out. Do not be afraid. I emerged from the trees and floated toward the pair, wings flapping. Something didn't seem right, but I couldn't ascertain what it was. As I reached Adam's side, I smiled, but he just looked past me, ignoring my presence. The Almighty let loose a thunderous laugh. When I met his gaze, somehow I suddenly understood. Heaven, hell, and we angels all exist solely in the spiritual plane. The earth, however, had been created in the physical plane, whereas from the spiritual one can see both planes. The physical plane only sees the physical. Adam couldn't hear me or see me because I had no physical being with which his physical body could interact. Then I realized what I sensed was wrong before. The wind from my beating wings had no effect on my surroundings, and the entire world was utterly silent. How am I to meet him, Father, if he cannot see me? I asked. The Almighty looked at me, and again as though he was placing knowledge directly in my mind. I understood. Every form in the physical universe is composed of particles of raw matter, all from that initial mass he brought into being from nothing. This same matter is never destroyed, just continuously recycled in new forms. To remedy the schism between the planes, God created more matter than was needed when he built the physical plane. This dark matter doesn't belong to any form. It just floats through the universe, an almost unlimited amount, ready to be used in the birth of a star or the formation of an eyelash. The knowledge the Almighty imparted to me was how to draw from that excess substance to create a body capable of interacting with the physical plane. I focused, and my body started to tingle as though millions of tiny stars ignited all over my skin. The air around me quivered, swirling toward my body. Microscopic particles were drawn in as moths to a flame and anchored to my spiritual form. It took but a moment, and when it was finished, I was encased in a physical body. Sensations from my new form rippled through me, overwhelming the experience of the material plane, so different from the immaterial. Perhaps the oddest sensation was that of my robe fluttering around me, having become more like cloth in the transformation. When I regained control of myself, I found Adam staring, eyes wide. He touched my arm and, finding me to be real, looked at the Almighty in wonderment. Then he made to name me as he had every other creature in the garden. God stopped him, informing Adam that I was an angel, the only type of creature he wasn't allowed to name. Hello, Adam, I said. I wondered if he knew he'd only just been created. I couldn't remember if I had known after my own creation. Hello, angel, he replied. I laughed, astonished by his utter innocence. To my delight, he joined me, his voice ringing out in joy for the first time. My name is Sabrael. There are many angels, but only I am known as Sabrael. Sabrael, Adam said. He began looking over my body, studying me. He looked at my chest, then at his own, at my face, then touched his own. Then, with a knitted brow, he ran a hand over his shoulder. Why do you have wings and I do not? I was unsure how to answer. Looking to God for guidance was no help. He just waited to hear what I would come up with. Why do birds have wings and you do not? We are as God made us, and to question why is not our place. Adam pondered this, then nodded. Beside him, the Almighty smiled proudly at the sight of his two greatest creations conversing, angel and man. I was about to ask if I might join in their walk, but before I could, a group of my brothers materialized beside me, matter coalescing into bodies. Adam's eyes lit up as they appeared, his smile spreading. He looked at God, who said, their names are Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Raziel, Daniel, and Metatron. Adam's gaze followed God's naming of each, and they nodded in turn. God instructed Adam to always heed the words of angels, for we were his guardians against evils that may one day confront him. The notion that Lucifer might one day break free from his prison was a dark reminder of the reason for the creation of the beauty around us. Bold move, sneaking away like that, Raphael whispered to me. Then with a nudge he added, next time, let me in on the fun. I know you are all excited to meet Adam, God said, but for now you must return to heaven. You will have your time to converse with man, but that time is not now. Without question or complaint, we obeyed, saying farewell to Adam and releasing the matter from our bodies. Our physical forms dissolved back into dark matter as we flew back to our posts in heaven. Adam was as amazed by the destruction of our bodies as he'd been by their creation. He reached out a hand, and the matter fell through his fingers like sand, sifting apart into particles too small to see or feel. How wondrous a creature was man! When Adam was ready, the Almighty led him to the tree of knowledge to give Adam that famous command I need not repeat here. Before I move on, though, I should clear up one thing. I wrote that Adam had a tail and was covered with hair. I imagine that may seem strange, but in truth, it's not hard to understand. It is written that man was formed in God's image, and this is true. The important fact to remember is that God has no physical form. Only when he wants to take physical form will he have one. Being created in God's image has nothing to do with appearance, but rather that man was created without sin and had not the knowledge of how to sin or even what sin was. How does this relate to Adam's tail then? The answer is simpler than one might think. Shortly after the creation of Adam's female partner, Eve, the unthinkable happened. Lucifer managed to free himself of hell's grasp. When he saw the earth, he became determined to corrupt it and destroy God's second attempt at perfection, knowing that taking physical form in his own likeness would alert those watching the garden to his presence. He instead made himself a serpent's body and spied on God's newest children from the brush. I'm sure everyone reading this knows what happened then. Lucifer's tempting of Eve to eat of the forbidden fruit, her tempting of Adam in turn, and their banishment from paradise. Since these events are clearly recorded elsewhere, I'll go into no more detail here. However, understand that when Lucifer tempted Eve, the fruit wasn't the issue. It wasn't magical. It didn't imbue her with powers or reveal secrets to her. The fruit was just a symbol, an arbitrary object which God commanded the humans not to eat as a sign of their love for Him. In tempting her to eat the fruit, What Lucifer really did was plant the seed of sin in Eve's heart. Until then, Adam and Eve still had their God given appearance. When Lucifer spoke to Eve, however, he instilled the desire to disobey God and gave her the means to do so. He altered her mind, and her appearance began to change in turn. When she then approached Adam, the changes in her intrigued him. She was exotic, alluring. Adam was powerless to resist her. After eating the fruit himself, he began changing as well. Remember now that the animals of the earth have never known sin. They simply do as God commanded at their creation. Some call this behavior natural instinct, but the fact is that no animal has sinned against the laws of God. They remain perfect creatures. With their introduction to sin, however, Adam and Eve were no longer perfect. This spark began the process scientists call human evolution. In the animal world, evolution is the slow adaptation to environment, the gradual alteration of the gene pool to favor the survival of a species. In humans, this is not the case. Your bodies today are physically far less capable of survival in the wild than your ancestors. Evolution has weakened the human species. Instead of natural adaptation, the human evolutionary process is one of disfigurement, driven by sin's corrupting touch. Just as Lucifer's was when he fell, man's appearance was altered to reflect their disobedience. As Adam and Eve birthed corrupted children, who then birthed even more corrupted children, and the roots of sin grew even deeper, mankind's appearance continued to change. Tails shriveled, hair fell out, bone density thinned. The process has been slow, but both Adam and Eve were aware of the process from the moment it began. It was this transformation they tried to hide from the Almighty, not the fact that they were naked. As more generations are born and die away, sin keeps spreading and the changes continue, driving you ever further from your original intended form. I hope you'll forgive me for sharing this. I'm only a messenger after all. Let me now return to what was happening in heaven and in hell at the time of the first sin on earth. In heaven, we angels marveled at the earth and all upon it. I couldn't seem to watch it long enough. Raphael would often join me, and we discussed the earth's creation, the fall of Lucifer, and why we each thought we needed to guard the halls. He believed the time was soon coming when the damned would escape their prison. Michael had convinced him of this. I didn't believe him, though. I argued that our brothers would be so ashamed of their mistake that they would gladly serve out their punishment if it were the will of the Almighty. Your lingering faith in them is honorable, Sabrael, but I can't believe they would ever stop seeking a chance to break free, Raphael told me. Why would they attempt to break free? I asked. God commanded them to remain in their prison for eternity, and as angels they are bound to follow his will. They are where they are because they did not follow his will. They are fallen, disgraced. Some of our brothers even have a new name for them: demons. For what reason would they follow God's will if God no longer recognizes them as his children? I cannot believe they would turn their backs on him, I said, seeing Raphael's logic but not wanting it to be true. He's their one source for forgiveness and redemption, their one chance to return to grace. Perhaps they no longer want God's grace, Raphael said. Have you thought of that? I didn't understand how he could think so little of them. These were the same brothers with whom we used to talk, laugh, and share in God's glory. Did all that mean nothing now? He added, once they escaped, I doubt they would even come back here. My bet is that they instead congregate on the earth. The thought horrified me. Earth? How would they even find their way there? The same way we did from here, Raphael contested. Who is to say the path up to earth from hell is not as easy to follow as ours down from heaven? God would never allow it. The earth was created to be perfect. Even if the fallen found their way there, who is to say that its beauty would not inspire them to repent? They made a terrible mistake. The pains they suffer now should be enough to destroy their desire to sin again. Raphael simply smiled and clapped me on the back. Sabrael, I hope your way of seeing creation will never change, for yours is an outlook that forgets none. Our discussions came and went in this fashion. I, the stubborn supporter of our fallen brothers, and Raphael, their vehement condemner. You can imagine then my disappointment when Lucifer reared his head on earth and caused the fall of man. Though I was the armed guardian of the first hall of heaven, I never wanted to believe that there was a real reason for the existence of my position. None of us did. While in his prison, Lucifer's hate for the Almighty had grown. He wanted only to destroy the perfection that God created in his absence. And when he did it at the first opportunity, we could only sit and watch. God forbade us from interfering. It must have made the act so much sweeter, knowing that once he reached Eve, there would be no way for us to stop him from tempting her. It was a test, and mankind failed it. God was furious, and man was exiled from the garden forever. We in heaven cried rivers for the fall of man, wallowing over the loss of God's most perfect creation. Lucifer had counted on this. Knowing we'd be overcome by grief, Lucifer enacted his real plan. Racing back to hell, he dashed open the locks, unleashing his followers. In a great dark flock that soared for heaven, bearing weapons forged in the depths, they had not been suffering their punishment in obedience, as I had hoped. They'd been preparing for war. It sounded like thunder at first, or a heartbeat. Bang! Our attention shot to the outer gate of the kingdom. Bang! The metal buckled, denting inward. Bang! Michael drew his sword, its silver gleam radiating the light of heaven. They have returned. The gate blew back on its hinges, and a flood of demons poured into heaven, rushing toward every hall in a tide of destruction. Michael stood his ground, but the rest of us guardians rushed back to our posts through the crowds of terrified angels still gathered in the commons. I slammed shut the gate to my hall and brandished my weapon, trying to prepare myself for the siege. I knew I could never alone overcome the horde of demons swarming this way. I looked at the angels gathered behind me, cowering from the deafening strikes against my gate. So many depended on me. I had to try. Flinching at each quake of the gate, I steadied my resolve until finally the gate broke and the demons punched through. My blade was lightning quick, slashing at the fallen to drive them back. Asmodee, one of the first of my brothers to sing Lucifer's praise before the fall, launched himself at me with a brutal mace, and it took all my effort to deflect the swooping arcs of the deadly weapon. Again and again he slammed it down on my blade, but when he finally swung it low, I missed the deflection. The mace head crushed my side, the alkaline taste of blood springing up into my mouth. Pain exploded down my entire body, paralyzing me. I had never felt it before. I cried out, overwhelmed by the sensation as he continued to attack, until by God's grace, a lucky flick of my sword sent the weapon flying from his grasp. Driven by my intense need to escape the pain, I smashed my fist into Asmodee's face, and he slumped to the ground. The battle had only just begun, though. One by one, a dozen of the fallen took Asmodee's place, forcing me to fight through the pain to defend my hall. I couldn't kill them, of course, for in the spiritual plane there is no death. But I could strip their weapons and wound them badly enough that they could fight no more. Luminous white blood soon covered my robe and the ground beneath me, yet no matter how hard I fought, the demons kept coming. Some of my brothers took up makeshift weapons of branches or stones to help, but they were decimated all too quickly. Crimson gold banners burned as the fallen set fire to my hall's great city and surrounding forest. My sword danced through slashes and strikes as I struggled to contain those pouring through the gate. Their weapons were driven by rage, though, and with their overwhelming numbers, I could do nothing to save my defenseless brothers who were cut down around me. I cried out for the strength to fight on, even as they finally surrounded me. Then, through the mass of opponents encircling me, I saw Michael, clashing swords with three of the fallen and throwing them back. Michael ran to confront Lucifer himself. Lucifer saw him coming and quickly dispatched my brother Hayed, bracing himself for the bigger contest. They met in an explosion of gleaming swordplay. Battle cries and the screech of metal broke the air as they whirled around. Michael concentrated intensely as he defended himself from each of Lucifer's strikes. But then more demons were upon me, and I could little afford to keep my own sword from moving. Astoreth, Another of the fallen bashed the wall beside the gate with his mace, trying to create a larger entry for the demons bottlenecking in the opening. Semyeza slashed at me with a weapon much like a trident. He stabbed at my chest, and I drove my blade up to deflect the strike. Then Hanel slashed at me from behind with a modified broadsword. The blade cut across my shoulder, tearing my robe and spreading the warmth of blood down my back. I couldn't move my arm. I caught a glimpse of Michael intensifying his attack. Hananel struck again, and this time I used his motion against him, allowing his sword to skitter across my own blade and plunge into Samyaza's chest. Samyaza screamed, his trident dropping to the ground and he beside it. Black wings spread as glowing, white blood poured freely. Hananel roared in anger, and I saw past his shoulder that Lucifer was cut across his forehead, the sleeve of his robe also stained with his blood. Hananel yanked his sword free of Samyaza and turned it on me. The weapon glanced across my blade and swung back over his head to slash down at me again. I buckled under the blow, falling to my knees as I caught his blade with my own. Then Astoreth joined the fight. I dove away as his weapon came swooping down, a mace with pointed edges and a single long spike protruding from the top. Rolling to the side, Hananel's sword still pressing mine, I shoved our two blades up and jumped as Hananel's sword flung up and over his head. It came down on Astoreth's head, cleaving into his skull. A small, extendable blade snapped out from each side of the main one, bursting out the sides of his face and splashing the crumbled wall with brilliant blood. Astoreth fell, howling as he struggled to pull the entrenched weapon from inside his head. Before Hananel could react, I drove my foot into his stomach and then kicked him square in the face. He collapsed, blood dripping from his mouth. I spun to face a dozen more foes, all clamoring to be next. Exhaustion gripped my limbs, my mind. I could not beat them all. Gritting my teeth, I yelled, and they rushed as one. Bracing myself, I prepared for the pain. But it did not come. Opening my eyes, I saw the fallen, held, restrained only inches from me. They thrashed, trying to reach me, but it was as though they were fighting against a wall. Amazed, I looked out and saw Michael standing with the point of his sword on Lucifer's chest. Wounded, weaponless, Lucifer backed toward heaven's gate. As the pair moved, the horde of demons involuntarily retreated with them, as if they could not be a single step further in heaven than their leader. I walked with them, struggling to hear Michael's words over their enraged bellows. My fallen brother, what grief you have wrought this day. I could see the tears streaming down Michael's cheeks. Destroyer of perfection, corrupter of earth, enemy of God. All these and more have you been called. And instead of hanging your head in shame, you force your way back into the kingdom from which you have been banished. My heart knows not how to handle the pain you have caused. Yet you would make me the one to throw you from paradise for the second time? Is there no mercy within you? Tears continued to fall from Michael's glowing gray eyes as he strode forward. The bodies of the fallen cut down in battle were dragged by that invisible force toward the gate along with the rest. Smears of blood trailed after Ashtoreth and Samyaza as their bodies slid toward their prison. Hananel and Asmodee followed behind. Michael continued, I wish I had never told you to go before God. Were it not for my misconstrued words, perhaps your fall would not have occurred, and for that I shall forever shed tears for you. But I cannot allow you to set foot within this kingdom. Return to your furnace. I pray you never attempt to escape again. Legions of demons spilled over the precipice into the raging pit below. At the edge, Michael grasped Lucifer and lifted the deceiver of mankind above his head. Lucifer yelled, struggling in vain. You cannot keep me out forever, Michael. I will have the throne. Michael's sobs choked his voice as he whispered, Not today. I fell to my knees as Michael heaved Lucifer forward, flinging him from heaven a second time. My fallen brother plunged down into the bowels of hell, where flames engulfed him and all the reigning bodies of the demon army. We had won. The battle was over. But Lucifer's words made one thing clear. A war had just begun. End of chapter 4.